Hey everybody, and welcome to Engagement is the New Black. As said, my name is Nico. I'm a BD manager for Google Play based out in Berlin, looking after Germany, Benelux markets, and so on. Later, during this presentation, I will be joined by the great Marcus Falk from the cool app LiveSum to share some first-hand experience on the topic as well. So probably when you read this title, and even now, you're like, why is Engagement the New Black? What's up with that title? So let me quickly give you an introduction to where we are coming from. Last year at Playtime in London, actually, my colleague Matteo did a wonderful talk on what app developers can learn from games. I'm pretty sure a couple of guys were here and saw that. Quick show of hands. OK, that's a good 50%. Awesome. So that talk was super well received. And as a follow-up to that, we actually ran a second event, which was a workshop completely on onboarding on conversion, which we ran, I think, in February in our London office with partners from the UK, but also all over from Europe. Anybody that attended this workshop in the audience? Cool. So one of the main things that was discussed in this workshop was one very obvious one, that obviously all you do like this on this onboarding and conversion is in order to get lifetime value outperforming the cost per install, right? That's an obvious one. And then when you looked into lifetime value, and that's one thing that really resonated with a lot of the people, it really depends on three things heavily. That is retention, engagement, and monetization. I'm not going to go too much into monetization because we have a full session on that just after this today that's going to talk about all about this. But I really want to focus on retention engagement because it's such an important driver to your business. And the question that came out of the crowd really aligned this. So therefore, for me, this is really the new black. And it's really interesting to see how the conversation I've been having over the last couple of years in this job has shifted from, oh, I have that many downloads, to I have that many installs, to, oh, we really do this to really engage a user. So it's quite a key topic. Before we do that, there is one thing that's kind of the antagonist of retention engagement. Can anybody guess what that is? It's churn, right? The users that are not engaged and that are not retained is the users that are churning. So I very quickly want to take a deeper look into what churn actually means before we move on into the next session, where I want to show some ways, or some easy fixes on how to actually engage and retain your users before we get Marcus on stage and share some of the insights they have. So let's face it, churn really happens to the best of us. It doesn't really matter, I mean it does matter, but even if you build the greatest product out there, even if you're in one of the top 10 developers on the Play Store, most successful, you will still lose a lot of you, like a good portion of your users. And I think that's natural. It's part of any business to customer relationship, not only the apps world, but in basically any business. And there are some common things that we see in actually our industry, why that is. So let's face them, let's name them. What are some common reasons for churn? And I would really appreciate if you help me there because there are many. Any ideas, just yell them out loud. Go.
The user didn't understand what it does.
Awesome, yeah.
It's boring.
Boring, another one. So I tried to come up with as many as I could find. Number one usually is poor technical quality. And if you saw the launch presentation this morning, it was actually mentioned that really low ratings are often caused by technical stability. Number two was actually spot on. It's insufficient value proposition. So the product is just not there, or it's not good enough. The third one is maybe the product is good enough, but you're not making it clear to the user. So it's not, they don't really know how great your product is. Or you're just not fresh enough. The content is outdated, the functionality is outdated, and you're not keeping pace with the market. Or it's not personalized enough. It's too interchangeable, right? It's great, but others do it as well, and the user, they like to try new things, so they go to something else, and they don't know why they should be coming back. And I think that's a classic. You just overdo it on push notifications or general communication. That's a classic one as well. And many, many more that I think cause problems, and they cause you guys headaches. And I know this from the various conversations I have with my partners and we have as a team with partners. However, what I personally really, really love about this industry is that you guys never stay with, oh, this is the problem. It's always about, oh, wow, this is the problem, and it's also an opportunity, right? Like, how can we actually use these things and turn them around into something better? And what I really love about my job at Google Play is that I work with so many interesting and forward-thinking partners, and that I actually have the chance to see all these different tactics and fixes and so on they use in order to retain and engage users. And what I want to do now is share some of the knowledge we have gained in that topic back to you guys. So here's a list of about 7 common themes that I personally think, and I learned from various conversations and meetings and also preparing this topic, that you simply cannot ignore if you want to retain and engage your users. You will see these slides more often, so if you don't manage to take the photo just now, it'll come back. One short disclaimer on this: it's by no means an exclusive list. There are many, many ways or many things that could be added to this, and if you really feel like there's something missing or we should investigate another bullet, or even if you think something is not right on this list, I'm very, very much looking forward to your feedback, and I encourage you, just like everybody else, to have that conversation with me, with anybody in the room, and keep the conversation going. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each of them in a bit more detail. And I would invite you to not only listen to me, but also to kind of actively go through your product and think about how you're dealing with these different things. And you'll probably find that being leading developers, you're doing a great job on many of them already. But first of all, there's always room for improvement, no matter how good it is. And second of all, also keep in mind that maybe you are very much aware of all these things, but maybe within your company, that's something you can spread more and engage more colleagues on this. So first things first, let's talk about the importance of having a good value proposition. I know, it seems super, super obvious, and it has been mentioned throughout various talks that I've seen today. But it's just really, really important to have it clear, to have that crystal clear. Here are some things or some questions that I think you need to have the right answers to. And again, it's not necessarily only you having the right answers to, but also make sure these answers are known across the various teams and across the company. So first of all, what is your USP? It could be many different things depending on which vertical you're in. If you're a publisher and you publish news or stories, then the quality of the story could be one of your selling propositions. If you're a fitness app, it could be that you motivate your users very well to actually exercise more, and so on. That, I think, is the most important bit. But also keep in mind that your users are usually not one homogeneous group, but there are different user cohorts. So there may well be more than one USP that is really important for your business. The second one is, what does engagement mean for you? And as trivial as that question sounds, really think hardly about what is it that you want the user to do that actually makes them fall in love with your product and come back and actually start building this relationship with you as a developer or as a product offering. And third one, it kind of goes along with number 1 and 2. What are the corresponding KPIs? Like whenever I have conversations with partners, and I think that's probably the same when you have conversations among each other, you compare a lot of KPIs, but it's not necessarily that the same KPIs are as relevant for everybody in the room, right? If you're, let's say, a document storage app that really helps me secure all my important documents, then actually retaining me over a year and having me log in once a year may be a super important KPI. While if you build a social app, on the other hand, you want to look into sessions per day that I generate, right? So be really aware of what KPIs are important to you. Number 2 is, again, I think a somewhat obvious one, but I want to give you a certain angle to it. It's to fully utilize the potential of the Android platform. And in the talks this morning, again, we heard a lot from Mark and from Ellie and Yelena and so on, like how much we're investing in making sure that the platform grows and gives you more and more opportunities. However, doing this is also a great way or a great tool for engagement and retention. In one of many great examples, WeVideo, it's actually a video editing app. They changed their whole UX to material design and were able to increase user engagement by 100% from doing that. Just because the experience became so seamless and understandable and great for users. And it goes beyond that. Adopting stuff like Android Auto, Android TV, or Android Wear can also make a huge difference on how you engage your users with your app. So another question for you guys. Are there any golf players in the audience? Any golf players? There's one. There's another one. I thought this is Great Britain, you know, it's a common sport. Anyways, so if you're into golf, you may actually know Hole 19. It's an app, I think it was also featured in the opening video today. You saw actually people playing golf, so you might be familiar with it from that. It's an app that lets you, gives you all the distances and GPS data on golf courses. I think they have about 40,000 golf courses in the world mapped out. It lets you do digital scorecards, track your scores, and then obviously share them with your other golfing buddies. They brought their app to Google Wear, and what they saw is a 40% increase in monthly active users, with Android Wear actually bringing some of the most engaged users, all of them. They actually go as far that they tend to call themselves, or they tend to call the app a Wear-first app, and it makes a lot of sense. Think about it. You're on the golf course, you just hit a birdie or a hole-in-one or whatever it is, and you want to track it. It's much more convenient to like do it on your watch and on your wrist than getting out your phone and logging into the app. So another great way to engage and retain your users. Moving on to the third fix or tactic, and that's probably my personal favorite, making user onboarding great. And it also came out of the Q&A from Peak, what is probably the most important thing for engaging users is user onboarding. It's not only my favorite topic, I also have my favorite analogy for it. First-time user onboarding is like a first date. So basically, you get all the excitement, you get the full and undivided attention, and you can ask all the questions in the world that you want to learn about the preferences from the other, from your user, or from your date. You do all this with only one goal in mind, to get another date, and then hopefully another date, and another date, and turn this into a long-lasting relationship. But with all that, we also know, that it's tricky, because there's also so much room for it to go wrong. So what I want to try to do on the next slide is give you some very simple guidelines of things you should keep in mind when you build your onboarding. And again, like go through your onboarding along these points and see if you actually meet the full amount of points on all these. So the first one is it should be fast and seamless, right? Nothing more annoying if it really takes forever when I just want to get to the actual stuff in the app. The second, it should be contextual and it should be part of the product experience. I think that is something that I still see so many partners not getting to a full capacity or doing as good as they can. And I'll show you an example of what I mean. And the third is asking users for minimal user input, while on the other hand, gathering all the information you need to actually create great engagement. And I think that's the tricky bit, because it's always a very fine line you're walking on. One fantastic example we have featured before, I think, is the fitness app Freeletics. So Freeletics, when you open it up, what I really like about it, it really immerses you in the product world, right? You get to this screenshot and you're you think the training has already started, even though you don't know what's coming for you when you then actually train. I just want to say that. So they really immerse you in their product experience, and they cater for different user cohorts. Basically, you get to the second screen, you select if you're male or female, and depending on that, the tonality and the screenshots and the onboarding really changes. Oh, other way around? No, this used to be animated. So basically, if you're a man, after this, the imagery goes into that tonality as well. Also, what they have done is they integrated with Google Smart Lock. So now when I use a new device and I log into Freeletics, they automatically sign me in. So they basically remove all the friction for me to become a sign-in user and get that user experience right where it left off. A very quick run-through of what Google Smart Lock can do. From left to right, this is the experience a new user has. The new user registers. They click to register, they select an email address, it could be any address that they have saved with Android or Chrome. Then SmartLock fills in the gaps, obviously outside of the password, the user gets to choose it themselves. They're logged in, and then on the last screen, they can decide if they want to save the password to SmartLock. And actually, we see across all the apps, we see, I think, 65% of users actually saving their passwords. And then they're in that system that makes it really easy for them. We also have two really cool case studies on that, which I'm just going to talk about. They're not on this slide, but Komoot, which is an outdoor activity app, that did an A/B test where they tested Google Smart Lock as a sign-in versus another sign-in, and they had a 19% increase in sign-up conversion with Smart Lock. And the second one is Zalando, which is a shopping app that see 20% of the current sign-in events are automated by Smart Lock. So if this is one of your aims, and I think most partners do really push for getting users logged in, then this is definitely something to consider for you. As I said, onboarding is not only important, it's not only my favorite topic, it's also super important. So with all super important things in your app, you should test, and test again, right? And iterate and test again. And one of another tool that I want to show you for that is Firebase Remote Config. That lets you run A/B experiments. It lets you custom control key values within your app, and the change and everything you change basically goes live instantly. So if you're familiar with the overall Firebase suite, that's another handy tool to look into to actually optimize the onboarding workflow, or also any other part in your app, quite frankly. So, quick recap before I move into the next one. We're at number 4 now. The first one was having a clear value proposition. Second one, leveraging the full Android platform. Third one, make great user onboarding. And number 4 is actually about successfully releasing new feature. And I call it the kind of younger sister or younger brother of user onboarding, because there's so many similarities in how to think about it. First of all, and you remember from the slide on reasons to churn, is you got to stay fresh, right? And you guys know this. You're leading developers in your industry. You know there's somebody coming for you, essentially, and you got to move ahead of the curve. You've got to come up with new features. If you're about content, you got constantly need to push new content in order to stay relevant to users. So that's a very general advice on that, which I think most of you are familiar with. When you do introduce new features or content, what I think is a very simple and systematic release methodology to follow is to first of all test it with beta users. That was mentioned before, to make sure that it actually works on retention and engagement metrics. Secondly, again, ensure technical stability. Thirdly, really show users what's new, and that's actually what the screenshot here is for. Imagine you had never seen this product and you were introduced to this and you could actually navigate from here if you're driving your car. There are some very easy ways with material design to make this visually very simple and lightweight, but yet very clear to users when they onboard to a new feature. And then, as a fourth point, obviously analyze the performance. Again, we have a couple of tools that are super useful for that. For point number 1 and 2, beta groups and Pre-launch reports, both were featured in large this morning. I'm not going to go into them. I just want to give it a big fat +1 or +2, depending on how you want to see it. On pre-launch reports, actually keep in mind that you need to opt in. So it's not going to happen automatically. So you need to go in the console, opt in for it to be activated, and then every single thing you upload to alpha or beta actually runs these checks. And then use cohort analysis in Firebase Analytics or in Google Analytics to really check the performance of new features. Right? It's one thing that you build something new and fancy and cool, but you really want to make sure that you actually optimize against that goal for retention or engagement that you have. And as always, numbers are the best way to make a decision. Another point you may recall from the list we showed of reasons why users churn is that your app or an app may be too interchangeable and with what the competitor is offering. One really cool way to counter this is to personalizing the experience, so to make the user feel at home. I think there are two main ways of doing this. Number one is where you basically give the user all kinds of manual ways to design the experience, right? You may let them toggle stuff in the home screen, switch stuff on and off, and so on. And I think all of that is great. Just what I think happens quite a lot, or what we hear happens quite a lot, that really remains something that mostly power users do, and it's really hard to get average or the broad range of users actually to do that. So another way to do this is by actually doing personalization, by using business intelligence to individualize the product experience. And I will show you what that means. A great example for this that was shared with me actually was from hotels.com. They basically anticipate they use user behavior to anticipate users' needs and provide the relevant experience in the right moments. So what does that mean? They try to map various scenarios for users coming into the app. One is onboarding. When it's about onboarding, they try to make it as convenient as possible for the user to actually go to sign in. When a user actually comes back to the app, so it's a returning user had searched before, then they may show them something that's relevant to their search or where they were left off. And then another scenario could be that somebody has actually booked a hotel with hotels.com, and on the day of check-in or check-out, they will provide relevant information, maybe around where people travel or stuff around the hotel and information. So they have different scenarios where the user really feels like this is a personalized experience to them. How they do that is, first of all, by being aware of all of that and actually caring and catering for it, but also by creating a flexible content structure that actually allows them to move around content and modules to react to this broad range of scenarios. And then the third one is that they actually exhaustively map the context instead of content or action the user was left in, so that when you leave and you come back, you really feel like you're continuing where you left off. So I think that's a great example of using data and a sophisticated technical approach to actually provide personal user experience for a broad range. And some of you may probably think now, oh, you said easy fixes. This seems very complex. Yes, this is probably one of the things that are not that straightforward and easy to set up. But once you have it, it's actually a very neat way to do that personalization. So I think it's really worth the effort of looking into that. The second last I want to talk about is having a great communication strategy, and it ties very much into the personalization bit. So push notifications is what I'm going to focus on, and they have become somewhat the standard on the platform and as an engagement tool, and rightfully so, right? They work great if you do a great job on them. However, there's also a fine line between using them to drive engagement on the one hand, or to actually make users churn because you're overdoing it or they're not relevant or whatever it may be. So again, some very simple rules in order to make that strategy successful. First, the push notification needs to be relevant. So the context, the language, the tonality needs to be relevant to the user. And be creative, right? Be true to your brand, be creative. Speak to the customer in a unique way. I think that's something that I still see a lot of partners not fully optimizing. Second, needs to be actionable. Is it an FYI? Is it actually a call to action? Do you want me to do something? If so, then make sure that it's deep link and that when I actually click through, I get to whatever you talked about. Because if that's not happened, then the user experience is really burned and you're like, okay, where am I? Why am I here? And you're probably not going to do it again, or you're less likely to push on opening the app again. Then third one is, I want to talk about timeliness first. Timeliness, the right message at the right time. Again, seems very obvious, but I think the the Rio Olympics were a great example of that. A lot of the stuff happened overnight for users in EMEA. So the question becomes, is it that Usain Bolt won the 100 meters or somebody broke a world record? Is that really more relevant at 3 a.m. in the morning on a Tuesday night? Or should you be waiting to push that message at 7 a.m. in the morning when you know your users get up and they actually check their news, right? So there are things to keep in mind and not only go, oh, this is a great thing, I'll just push it out, because it may lose its effect on users. First off, and then the fourth point is personalization. You should segment users, you should have your cohorts, and then also proactively let users opt out of stuff and opt into other stuff. Especially the opt-out part seems counterintuitive, but let me give you one great example where, what you see on the left actually, this is a screenshot of Aftenposten. It's a huge, or one of the biggest newspapers in the Nordics. And they basically, a while ago, they redid the whole kind of onboarding, and as part of that, the new notification management screen. And they show some fantastic results. So basically now when you onboard, users get to select to, I think this is pre-selected, and then they get to opt out, but they're proactively asked to do so. So what they saw is, first of all, that I think over 50% of the users actually keep 2 of the 3, right? So they take one off consciously, but they take the other ones because they think they're relevant. And then overall, they saw a decrease of uninstalls by, I think, 9% over 60 days, which I think is a strong argument for the point I tried to make earlier, where too many push notifications or not having a strategy can be really be something that leads to churn, while it should be really something that helps you engage and retain users. And then also another interesting side effect is that they really learned about the users and the preferences of those users. And to my surprise, apparently there were less users interested in sports than in the other topics. For me, usually that's exactly the other way around. Again, just to highlight one tool that you can use for that very well is Firebase Cloud Messaging. It lets you target individual devices, codes, and so on. Super reliable, and it's cross-platform. It doesn't only work for Android, so you can use it across your platforms, web and iOS as well. Last but not least, rewarding user engagement. Let's talk a bit about that. I think very generally, this should be something everybody should be thinking about from the perspective of making it really desirable for you to become, for your users to become an engaged user with you. And when they are engaged user, really reward them and show you that you value that. Obviously, it's a topic, and this is something I realized more than ever when I started researching it for this talk, that you can go really deep in when it comes to like gamification and the mechanics around it and so on, right? And there are many great strategies, and probably with a lot of the gaming guys here, they could go on about this for length and without any end. However, it can already start with very simple rewards mechanism, right? It's a broad range, it's a large spectrum of stuff you can do, and what works for your app really depends on your app, on your industry, if you have what business model you have, if freemium, premium, and so on. However, if you just if you're not doing anything at all, and I think you should, then you can start with keeping it very simple, thinking of something that adds value to your users and makes sense and fits with your overall app ecosystem. So a couple of good examples are inviting power users to early access, to test beta features and so on, give them a special preview, right? It's a very simple one, but you wouldn't believe how many users really love that. And I do it for a lot of the products that I love too, where I proactively tell the developer, please like include me in like product testing just because I love the product so much. The second one are badges, right? How do I know that? Because you guys all love it. Whenever it's about a badge on Google Play, people go crazy. Top developer badge and editor's choice and so on. And usually the ones that go most crazy are the devs, right? Maybe sometimes the business people we talk to, they're like, what's the impact, what's that? And they talk about all these numbers. And then we talk about that, but then when they get it, they tell me, oh, my Android developers freaked out. We're like, best of that, we're part of here, right? So really giving these simple badges, usually it doesn't cost you anything. It just you need to come up with a structure on how to do it. And you can really show users how valued they are. And then you can do stuff like offering app-exclusive discounts. Generally, the more you can individualize that, the better. But again, starting off with a very broad range and basically just showing users that you value that they are there and go from there is a really good start. The bottom line is, these engaged users are your best customer, and they should be valued, because who does not like to be valued? So, here are the 7 fixes again in an overview. I think you had enough from me for now. This was quite a lot of input, I think. So it's time for some first-hand experience, and I would like to welcome Markus Falk from Lifesum up on stage.
Thank you, Nico. So now I feel very gamified around the badges things. Cool, so I guess a lot of you probably think that I'm here to present the secrets around the holy grail of retention. And if I happen to do something like that, please feel free to share that with me, because that would be some fantastic knowledge to have. But as Nico said, I'm Markus. I'm from Lifesum. And I think that retention and engagement is probably the most interesting topic, because it's basically tells you like how good is your product. I mean, if your users are coming back, it's a good product. So that's the one metric that should be above everyone else, I think. So just going to give you sort of a bit of an insight around how we think around retention at Lifesum and engagement. So starting off with a little bit about us, but also what retention and engagement means to health in specific. Then a little bit of what we track and why we track it. And then I have 2 examples, one where we tested and failed miserably, and the other one where we tested and actually succeeded. It's nice that you can set up this agenda, because then it looks like it's a 50-50 split there, which might not always be the case. And then I'm running up with a few sort of takeaways. So start with a bit about us. I think there are a few things within health that needs to be fixed. So today, healthcare is actually a lot about sick care. It's like you wait until you get sick, and then you get treated. But instead, it should be that you do a lot of stuff with your lifestyle before you actually get sick. I mean, the way you eat, how you train, exercise, how you sleep, stress levels, etc., will affect your life. So that's basically what we are here for. We are here to sort of help you with that. But then when we talk about engagement and retention, I think it's kind of interesting when it comes to health, because no one has really solved it in a good way. And I don't think that's all about like just health apps, but I think it's for the health sector in general. So let's take gyms, for example. I think in the US you have about 70% of people that are on a gym subscription isn't going to the gym. And you have, like, when it comes to medication or medical and pharma, about 50% of people that are on medication isn't taking them properly. So the challenge is, like, how do you get people to think it's like interesting and fun to take care of themselves, which is hard. But of course, within this sort of industry, you can be either good or you can be bad at this. And I think that Lifesum is, we're not the worst, we're definitely not the best either. But for us, it's definitely the #1 company goal is to work with retention. It's the stuff that we talk about every day. It's definitely the key for us. So we haven't figured it out, but we are trying to do a lot of stuff around it. So a little bit about what we track and why we track it. So we have a few standard metrics that we follow on a daily basis. So we look at 7-day retention, we look at week 5 retention, and look at week 53 retention. So of course we do deep dives, etc. within those, but these are the ones that are standard. So what we noticed was that when the users come into the Lifesum app, a lot of them has actually decided that they want to change something with their lives. They want to become healthier. So they're super engaged in that very first moment when they come into the app. But then what we've seen is that they rapidly drop off during the first 7 days. So for us, the number one metric to follow has been the 7-day metric. But then most recently, we've started to think a little bit different around retention, that you shouldn't really treat it the same way for all users, because it's kind of different depending on what you want to achieve. So we looked at the data and we see that we have basically like 4 different types of users. The master, the focused, the dieter, and the long-term, I've named them. So let's take the dieter, for example. You have like, in the US, the average American goes on a diet about 4 times a year, which is quite a lot. It's crazy, I know. And that diet will last from anywhere between a few days to a few weeks. So for us then it's important. So instead of trying to force the dieter's behavior to become the master, which is like tracking every day for several months, we should just recognize, okay, this person is on a diet. We need to make the app as good as possible for them to come back for their next diet. So that sort of thinking, like, okay, if we can put these people in different buckets, we should treat them differently. So 2 examples. Let's start with the sad one. So we have this knowledge about the users are very motivated in their first visit. So we thought that if we can get them to invest a lot of time and energy in the app, at first they will be coming back. So we basically created this massive health test of 41 questions. We brought in consultants, nutritionists, etc. We built it into the onboarding flow. We put it on the profile page. We prompted it several times. It was a massive project. It took us months to develop. And then when we released it, of course, we were super excited. Like, this is going to have a massive impact on 7-day retention. And everyone was just waiting for the data. And when it came, it was the sound of no hands clapping. Like, nothing happened. So, of course, it was a big failure. But then, of course, with failures, you usually get some stuff out of it. For us, it was, I think, first we managed to confirm that we have very high initial motivation. So, out of the people starting the test, we had about 90% completing all 41 questions. So within a few weeks, we had like 1 million of these test results. And that data is kind of valuable. So, I mean, first of all, it's interesting. You can see, like, okay, how many percent is vegetarian in London compared to Stockholm, for example. But also, referring to the buckets that I talked about, we can actually profile users now based on this data. So it's something that we are not doing it yet the way we should be doing it, but it's a really interesting source. But of course, from a retention perspective, it wasn't good. And I think what we learned from that is also what the guys have been talking about before, is that, I mean, you need to find ways of testing stuff before you put a lot of effort into it. So what we also did stuff that was working out. So going back a few months, we didn't really have any sort of social interaction in the app. And I think the reason for that was that we didn't really know what people wanted to share. Because when it comes to your personal health, especially around weight loss, it's not that you want to like, oh, you don't want to share everything on Facebook. Let's put it that way. So what we did here is that we created this very small, intimate social feature, like very simple, and we ran a test in Sweden. So it's basically that you could invite up to 5 friends to become your sort of team. And within that team, you could basically push each other and motivate each other. You could also remind people if they were dropping off. So when we got that out, we saw that people on social actually had a 2x increase in 7-day retention, which was, of course, fantastic. I mean, but if you think about it, it's like if you have 5 people and 3 of them drop off, and then you have 2 more that can keep reminding them, that's always going to be better than if you have like 5 silos where no one can talk. So from that perspective, it was really good. What we had some issues with here was, though, that the adoption rate, like we didn't really got that many users to be on social. So we popped a survey for them who declined, and the reason was still like privacy. I don't want to share my data. So this is still a big challenge for us to try to figure out, but also massive potential. So yeah, wrapping up a little bit, I think, I mean, looking at your own users' retention is interesting. So not just like treating retention the same way across different apps or even across your own users. So try to find like what are your patterns? For us, it might be very high initial motivation or that we have a lot of dieters in the app, but it might be different for you. And then social is key. I mean, if you can get your own users to help you with retention, it's always going to be good. And then also that, like referring to the health test that we did, and I think that everyone is saying this, but it needs to be said over and over again, is that you need to find easy, quick ways of testing your ideas before you spend hundreds of thousands on building them. Cool, so yeah, back to Nico to sort of wrap it up a bit.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, so it's great to see that a lot of the points resonated with you, at least. That's a start. So very quickly, I know you guys are waiting for another coffee break. That's what I think is happening after this. Before we do that, I want to go back on the one summary slide. This is actually Dr. E. E is obviously for engagement. And this is his checklist that he uses to go through his apps. So I encourage you to take this list, take a screenshot, or actually take it later from YouTube, and take it home with you, go through it with your teams, and see what are the things you're doing, what are the things you're doing good, what are the things you're doing great, and wherever you're not great, really think about how you can actually get there. So we hope this was useful for you guys. Thank you very much.